I don't know
But don't
about that,
forget to call
but,
them
you
out.
know. Thank you, Dave Squared.
Yes.
Marty in the back, thank you for this venue. My name is Robert. I'm a recovering auditor and investigator. So I've been doing this for quite a few years, probably 30 plus. For those of you who didn't see my bio, I have really kind of been an operator for many years, involved directly in the front lines, working with clients, working, both embedded as well as with organizations that provide services too. And that's ranging everything from GRC to incident response to compromise recovery to working in international trades and arms, compliancy requirements, ISO 27000, really kind of a wide variety of things. So I may sound like a generalist, but I go deep dive on all of that.
If you can speak up a little
Oh, okay.
for the people online. I don't know.
Oh,
Your
that's
beard
my
may be,
beard, yeah,
your
exactly.
beard's a muffle.
Yeah, it could be.
Oh, yeah.
So you want me to just hold it? Is it better
Sure.
online? Can I hear me all right?
Keep going. Yeah, I asked.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, can you go to the first slide, please?
Yeah.
So again, I wasn't sure if the audience was gonna be a bunch of auditors, so I'm gonna give you 3 disclaimers before we start. One, I will not take responsibility for any mental or physical cringe reactions to any of my jokes throughout the presentation. So that's number 1. Number 2, people tell me I have a radio voice, so it's very calming and soothing. So if you do fall asleep, I'm not going to take it personally, just to let you know. And then the third and final one is anybody in here or online is afraid of mimes? No, nobody? All right, that's good. So you'll understand shortly. Again, Robert Renzulli, been here in San Diego since 2017, former CISO for the Port of San Diego. I guess my claim to fame here in Southern California is I was incident commander for the Samsung ransomware event that took place at the Port of San Diego in 2018. It was a very unique event in that we were one of the first ports that was able to. Sure.
Who here is familiar with the incident that happened?
It was a while ago.
Yeah, 1.5.
1.5. So essentially what happened is the Port of San Diego got hit by Samsung ransomware in 2018, September 25th. For those of you who keep track of when CISA was born, CISA wasn't born until 2018, November of that same year. So didn't have CISA to lean on to come and help us out. The kind of the chain of events are we got hit administratively, brought completely down. One of the key things though is how many of you have been through an incident before? All right, got a few. What was the first thing that you guys thought of? So as soon as you got hit, what was kind of the first step? And sorry, I know you got a mouthful of food there.
The step shut it down.
So yeah, definitely a technical response, right? So shut it down, minimize the risk, etc. What was kind of your next step after that? It was not a question.
Notify everybody.
Fantastic. So there was an extra step that the port put in, which was we immediately, as soon as all the systems went down, we took technical action. We made sure that the adversaries were no longer in our environment, meaning could not do any additional harm. We immediately started talking about public safety. We then started talking about our employees, right? How are they doing? What is going on with them? So there is a big human element to this. And I want to emphasize that because as I go through my presentation, we are all still going to be very active participants, obviously, in cyber, right? And all the different elements, GRC, incident response, compromise recovery. I know everybody talks about AI, and I'll address that a little bit as we go in through here, but without the human element, doesn't matter how smart AI is, it's not gonna solve all our problems. So what I wanted to bring up at the Port of San Diego, which was kind of unique, is that, one of the first things we made sure that we did was pay our people. I don't want any of my cyber incident, was basically the entire port, having to worry about getting paid. Right? We want them focused on the incident. We want them focused on working with each other and collaborating and making sure that we're responding appropriately to bring the port back up and running again. But public safety was the first thing. And I know that private sector versus government, because they are a special district, the Port Authority, may have slightly different priorities, but what you do, especially in medical, biotech, pharmaceutical, utilities, it all has some impact to your customers, your individuals, the people, the citizens in the area that you're in. I work with the Public Utilities Commission out of Pennsylvania, is one of my clients. Again, top of mind, how do we protect the citizens? So fundamentally, for me and my team, cyber is about protecting that end user, and that's including the employees.
So this, you said there's system just recently involved a company. I don't speak to this.
Yeah.
Did you have a cybersecurity incident response plan scripted out? Did it activate the PR plan?
So no, great question. And I had only been at the port since October of 2017, and we were in the process of actually building it. So we hadn't actually developed one yet. We had just kind of reverse engineered the one that we had, and we're in the process of building it up. And to give you a little bit of context, I was the first ever CISO that was board approved at the Port of San Diego. So that first kind of 7 months prior to the incident was really just educating the port on what a CISO does, right? And what a security analyst is and what an InfoSec team is comprised of. So to answer your question, we didn't. So I didn't even know who to call, honestly. I ended up calling the Fusion Center here at the LECC, and they helped facilitate me contacting others. So we ended up working with the Office of Emergency Management out of the governor's office out of Sacramento. But to kind of close loop on what you just asked, we implemented the FEMA incident command system. So we converted ICS, which is normally for kinetic events, right? Fires, earthquakes, active shooter, that type of thing. We ended up transitioning that over and cyberizing it. And that helped us to structure our response. So even though we didn't have the incident response plan, we still had contracts in place. We still work with our vendors. We still brought in, so we had Microsoft embedded there. We had our firewall vendor was literally living on site with us. So we did have some elements of that, but we really had to adapt.
Just out of curiosity, when it did happen, what was the size of your team?
Myself?
I was gonna say, does that include you?
Yeah, that includes me. So
Yeah.
it was myself and my first hire, who is now the CISO for the Port of San Diego, Billy Marsh.
Hey.
So he was a red teamer. So that was my first hire. I wanted somebody to actually look at our environment from an adversarial perspective to see where our weaknesses are, where our attack surfaces were. And we had actually come a long way. We had implemented change management, very structured change management process within that 7 months. We did a lot of education and involving everybody and all the different business units and departments. So I can't stress enough, education was a key element, but there was 2 of us. He also, Department of Defense, he worked on the med device side, was his background. So he understood hardware, understood, the red team perspective. And then my background is military intelligence, tactical electronic warfare, and counterintelligence. So a lot of what I did was I approached this as we were being attacked, and essentially we were, and ended up being 2 Iranian nationals that we ended up indicting that same year in November. So, yeah, we were understaffed. On the InfoSec side, But again, one of the unique things about the port is the CTO and I were already developing cyber roadmap and digital transformation. So what was nice is instead of falling back to legacy, we actually moved forward on the roadmap. And
Gotcha.
I have to give the executives a lot of credit. I have to give the commissioners a ton of credit for trusting us to move forward after, never waste a good crisis, right? But during that crisis, they allowed us to get rid of all of our legacy debt. So by the time we went into compromise recovery, we were already up on all the latest servers, the latest version. I mean, it was basically scorched earth, right? So
Right.
we restood it back up with a forward view. And we had already, about 3 to 4 months prior to that, presented our 18-month roadmap for moving forward and digital transformation and really trying
Okay,
to get rid of that legacy debt. So timing wise counts as well.
right.
You didn't hire them,
Uh,
right?
Oh, to get it approved?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think, the experience, skill sets, everything kind of came into place. I realized later that there were resources here in Southern California that I probably could have reached out to. But that was after the fact, right? So we were working with US Coast Guard. One key thing that happened, is communication. So, I think it's either a year or the next following year, the deputy director of the FBI said that this incident changed how the FBI actually communicates. And the reason was, here we're a port authority, we get hit by SamSam, right? We get hit by ransomware. I have to collaborate, meaning the port has to collaborate with the commander of the port, which is Sector San Diego, which is US Coast Guard, who is responsible for the physical security and safety, right? Public safety within the bay. So we work together. Now, you would think US Coast Guard, Department of Homeland Security, they have some authority, they don't. So what had happened at the time, what we discovered was as soon as we realized there was an active investigation going on after we had collected the forensics and had figured out, hey, this matches a pattern of a particular group. We didn't know if it was a group or if it was one person or a pair, but of a group that over the past 4 years, it hit 200 other institutions, hospitals, higher education, city of Atlanta, city of Colorado. I mean, these guys were just wrecking it for almost 4 years. Once we discovered that, now all of a sudden this goes into an active investigation, which then limited our ability to share information with Coast Guard.
Oh, yeah.
Because there was no memorandum of understanding on an active investigation. So we had to basically create, if you're familiar with them, the pins or pips, or not pips, but pins that come out from the FBI that say, hey, there's something going on in this region, kind of generic, and here are the IOCs and the IOAs and the TTPs of that particular incident. We had to kind of route that through, right? This snaking way to get over to the Coast Guard to Sector San Diego, so that they knew, hey, do we need to react? Is this going to affect us? Is it going to hit other ports? So there was, it really kind of opened up that we had some channels of communication and that networking, knowing your law enforcement, knowing your incident response capabilities, knowing, others that can, of your peers in the area that can help you. It's critical. I can't stress that.
Right.
It was definitely a challenge for us. So the FBI had changed and created an MOU. So now for all ports, and especially the 17 critical infrastructure ports around the nation, if there's an active investigation, CISOs at the ports can proactively share information.
And you, is it mic on here?
Yeah.
And you said that the fusion center already existed at that point in time, or was that like kind of getting
Yeah.
created?
So the fusion center was there. I don't know how many of you are familiar with fusion centers, LECCs, law enforcement, law enforcement communication centers. So I think California has 5 of them. I think possibly 6
now. They're
Yeah, I
gonna
think it's
add
6.
2 more.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. I couldn't remember. So San Diego has an LECC. And what they do is they collaborate with multiple agencies, including intelligence. So it's not just cyber, it's physical, it's when we have Big Bay Boom, or we have Comic-Con, or we have the LECC is part of in the background, making sure that these different agencies are operating within the space here are situationally aware of each other. So that was my first call. I just happened to speak at an event in October. This is the first month I was there at the port. Joe Oregon, for those who may know or not know that name, who is now Western Chief for CISA, was at that event on the panel, and we just connected and started talking, and he was my first call when we had the incident.
Okay, yeah.
And what he did was he helped me connect to the appropriate resources. We talked to the city. They didn't quite have what we needed, which was fine, right? So at least we were collaborating. I was working with Darren Bennett at the time. And we then didn't realize that there were some other resources that were close by that we probably could have leveraged. But we did reach out to, like I said, the Office of Administration, our Office of Emergency Services in Sacramento. They flew down a TAC team for us, and it was comprised of National Guard, the Cal OES, one of their people. Can't remember the third party company that they work with, the tech company up there. And what they did is, as soon as they got on site, I had them look everywhere else. So that's another key thing that I like to share with you. When you're in an incident, don't assume they're only going after one thing. Right, so what we found out is when we brought in that TAC team and I had them looking at other parts of our network. We had 12 buildings, we had 2 internet connections, we had dark fiber, we had wireless throughout, the boardwalk there, within San Diego. Found out that these 2 were actually sitting on our wireless side of the house. So if we had switched over to that for backup comms to try and coordinate our response efforts, they probably would have seen it.
They would have known. Yeah.
So, never just assume that also it's only one attacker. A lot of the time, forensically, over the years, what I've kind of taken a look at, and this goes into why auditing and compliance and making sure that you have, that visibility into your environment is so critical. Is because where it's not nominal, you want to know about it instantly, right? If it's not functioning like you expect it to function. So I joke around, but I truly believe it in my bones. Security experts, security analysts, security, individuals, be it physical or digital, we're efficiency experts, right? We take a look at it and say, your ecosystem, your process, it's broken. You guys need to fix it. You need to, you're right. That's what auditors do. Come in to say, hey, you guys have it on paper. Sometimes.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. But then you don't practice it. Right. So that's another key thing is exercising and making sure that you are, stress testing. And again, this is not a checklist, right? This is from scars, lacerations. I think I got a tattoo from that particular event and some other events in the past. You have to put it into practice. You can't just sit back idly and say, yep, I have a COOP, I have a COG, I have a business continuity plan, and I have an incident response plan. Because as soon as you try to apply it, if you haven't tested it, I guarantee it's gonna break. So I know I kind of just jumped right in, so I figured we had the time, so.
No, it's all
Yeah,
good.
we haven't even gone to the second slide.
And we just had the first person online asking if it's okay that we're still on the cover slide.
Right, yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
So if you want to go to the next slide.
Sure.
No, but this is interactive.
Yeah. And does
So
anybody
please.
have any questions
Yeah.
about that or anything you want to ask?
Yeah, attribution, when did, oh. Yeah. You guys are obviously a little bit different as a public entity, but, attributing it back to those Iranians, did that happen after the FBI did an investigation, let everybody know, or was that an effort that you guys did during the cleanup to kind of know what was going on, who it was?
It was actually during the incident. So, I have. My background goes back to, I worked in the payments industry right after I left the military. So this is back in the early nineties, worked with a little startup company. We basically ran the first ever internet transaction. So through Net Verify, so you guys can look it up if you want. But what I found is working for that organization, I ended up getting pulled into a lot of electronic fraud cases. So I ended up working with the FBI, the Treasury Department, Secret Service, merchant identity theft, debit fraud rings, skimming, all those things that you hear about or have heard about in the past. I ended up getting thrown right into it. So
Right.
I had a long relationship with the FBI. And when I brought them in during that incident, to answer your question, it wasn't they came in and took over. It was they came in and I guided them into what I would like them to get involved with. Right. So I really still maintain that control. I was used to how they operated. We collected forensics. We even had undetonated malware in memory. So we provided them just a wealth of forensics. We actually cut them off quickly enough that we had their entire toolkit. So we had everything, all their scripts, everything that they used to launch, the whole 9 yards. So we turned all that over to them. And then through the incident, as we're trying to find patient zero and we're trying to discover, the FBI in parallel is already chunking through this and then reaching out to their field offices. So it ends up the investigation originated out of New Jersey. So it was the New Jersey field office that was actually running as the prime on that. And then the San Diego Sorrento field office through us was providing that forensics information. So that attestation kind of, again, it led to an indictment in November. So we got hit in September 25th, and the indictment was put on the DOJ site in November that same year. So it was rapid.
Really fast.
But again, it's making sure that you have that experience. Don't just think about one thing. You have to kind of, like a hacker, jumping off me here. Like a hacker, you have to think there are no boundaries, right? There is no box. So you have to kind of think that way when you are trying to protect your environment. Sounds counterintuitive, because a lot, you always heard defense in depth. In this case, yeah, it's defense in depth, but it's kind of situational. And there's so many different ways that once somebody gets in, they could start to plant things. We've learned that over the past 10, 15 years. That we have people living off the land, we have enemy behind the wire situations, things along those lines. So I know it's probably a little bit more than what you asked, but we had tested very quickly that it was definitely out of Iran. We had the home address of one of them already, and we already had visibility into the Bitcoin wallet. So, by the way, court did not pay. We did not declare an emergency, which is kind of critical. So we didn't pull funds from anywhere else. We managed it internally. We were administratively shut down, and yet we still facilitated 2 cruise ships. We still had bulk cargo coming in and out. Harbor Police Department was still protecting the San Diego airport and the entire waterfront. So it really did not disrupt any of our operations. We did have, can't say how many, but we have quite a few cameras just for physical security. So people, like, they fall in the water or whatever, we can respond quickly for life-saving response, or individuals getting into terminals that they shouldn't be in. We weren't able to archive the data, but we still had access to be able to view and see what's going on. So we pivoted, and I give, again, the employees at the port just phenomenal credit for coming together.
Right.
We cyber deputized everybody. So even those that weren't on hands-on keyboard, they're going around making sure that we were fed, that people were taking breaks. So it was a really combined effort. That's 400 employees, all the way to mechanics, to groundskeeping, to wharfingers, to our parking department. I mean, everybody was involved. So yeah, it was just a very positive experience because I had been through multiples through CenturyLink, Saps Communications, Cyber North America, where we had New York Stock Exchange, Coca-Cola. Pretty much every time HBO launched a Game of Thrones episode, they got DDoS on their streaming. So my entire team, sitting on, a call for 24 hours as it's streaming to make sure that it doesn't go down. So that was a lot of fun. Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, I think it was Veep. I think it was Game of Thrones. I mean, any launch of a new season, we were always on a call. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And they got hit every single time. Every single
Yeah,
time.
you know what's coming.
Yeah, we just knew it was coming. Different botnets, but that's a whole other story.
Okay.
So let's go to the next screen because people are probably getting tired of seeing my name up there. Oh, no, another picture.
Yeah, yeah. Watch what you ask for.
Yeah, exactly. It was me, yes. Yeah, and then I grew over this. And then got a few little gray hairs here. So if any of you have seen my LinkedIn profile, this is the photo that's up there, I believe. So many years ago, I used to do a counter social engineering. So I think LinkedIn was born in 2003. And unfortunately, new technology, new social media, people using it. Well, guess what? A lot of fake profiles, right? And I have up there, remember the good old days when a photo was actually a photo, right? With a camera that you hold in your hand, and 35 millimeter or whatever you use. So that's an actual photo. So we can click to the next.
Oh, sure.
And this is the mind part. That's where I came from. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is part of counter social engineering, especially in social media, right? Which we all know has just been crazy. Cyberbullying, human trafficking. I mean, there's some pretty serious dark sides to social media. Impact to our children, impact to our families, our elderly, What I was trying to do is, specifically in the domain I was working in at that point, VIPs were being targeted in corporations, especially in the financial sector. And they were getting basically socially engineered on LinkedIn. And what was happening is they had no real understanding, and LinkedIn at that time was still dealing with, their launch and trying to figure everything out. They didn't really have any guidance on, I get a LinkedIn invite request and I get this great photo of this model, right? Male, female, good looking person. So what I was doing was teaching VIPs and CEOs and employees in critical areas within a company how to use the Google image search. And what we found were Bollywood actors, comedians out of Germany. We had a singer out of Brazil. So it was just trying to get them to realize that these are fake LinkedIn sites, right? So kind of sent them out, and then so this was on a shoot. So I was actually an extra on a movie way back when. But I also was talking to investigators. So I was talking to those individuals and auditors that were trying to build policies about acceptable use of social media and everything that we do today, but now we're building acceptable use for AI, right? How do you apply it? How do you use it? How do you work with it? So one of the questions I would ask is, who's the bad guy in that photo? Anybody?
That's a good question.
See. Yeah, is the mind protecting me, or yeah? So actually the guy in the black shirt is the bad guy. So I was formerly a black hat growing up before the Army got a hold of me and turned me into a gray hat. So grew up in San Francisco Bay Area, Oakland, California, born and raised. So the gentleman next to me is a highly decorated Ranger, Army Ranger, and a former LA County SWAT officer. And he got into acting to bring awareness for veterans' mental health and really to, encourage veterans to transition out of and get into the workspace and kind of get out of their own heads and get on the stage and start acting. So he's done just some phenomenal work over the years. He's still very active. I went to high school with him. So, we go through that cycle and then I say, okay, well, where are we? Anybody know where that photo was taken with the limited information that's there? Good guess. Good guess. What was that? Oh, no, good guess. I've been there quite a few times. That's Federal Plaza in Oakland, California. So we were able to do a full movie shoot there. And the reason why I bring that up is less about the location. It's more about, at that time, I had an audience of very young investigators and auditors. And, even back then, we talk about millennials, we talk about the next generation. Even then, they weren't really following what I call the Sherlock Holmes principle. In other words, they would look surface and say, okay, and make a decision. And then they go one layer deep, make a decision, and then they go to the FAQ, right? They wouldn't go any deeper than that to really find out what's going on and do investigation. And I bring that up because auditors by nature, that's what we do, right? We peel back the layers of the onion. Well, investigators do the same thing. And cyber incident response does the same thing. There's a pattern, right? And those are the types of individuals, and that's the type of education and training that you want to integrate into what you're doing, and you want to make sure that your clients are doing the same thing. So next slide, please.
Sure. Oh, and Kelly online said you look very dapper.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah. So.
Well, there. That's what I transitioned into. So,
We'll see what
and
Kelly says.
Yeah,
now.
distant cousin of Santa Claus. All right. So I'm gonna ask a simple question here. Is this AI generated or not?
The middle ground, like AI enhanced.
You nailed it. That's exactly it. So I use 3 separate applications. All 3 of them have AI built into them to generate certain elements of this final output. I did this, 1, because I wanted to see what AI does from a productivity standpoint. 2, I wanted to see how AI handled this and trying to do deep fake and mess around with my image, right, for something that AI generated, and to see if it was accurate and could deep fake me. And so far it hasn't been able to. So I've had quite a few friends do it. I'm not saying this is the silver bullet or the secret to preventing deep fakes, but it does seem to cause some confusion because as it starts to map and try to figure out everything, AI is structured in a way that there are patterns built into it. Not my patterns, the patterns I created. So just food for thought to think about that, right? So as we look at AI, we start to develop, and our adversaries use AI to great effect, both visual, auditory, right? So they're using it to bypass certain biometrics. They're getting pretty advanced. I talked to an individual 2 days ago. He literally demonstrated to me how he could develop and deploy 25 LinkedIn accounts. All of them are digital only, doesn't link to anybody in the real world. So they're all digital identities. Yes.
This room is, sorry. I'll take it to the poll. So can you raise your hand if somebody wants to link it with you? You just click it, like that. Raise your hand if you do. Okay, that's interesting because I think some people think that LinkedIn is a popularity contest.
Very much so. And I'm glad you brought that up.
It's dangerous for us.
I agree. And part of what I was going to close this out with is 100%. There's a lot of people that use LinkedIn from a social standpoint, right? Not really what LinkedIn is for. And I'm hopefully not going to scare all of you, but LinkedIn is probably one of the single best sources for open source intelligence. So I know that, myself and teams that I've worked with, use it to quickly profile.
If you can just repeat what Jackie's question was.
Oh, sure.
Some of the people online couldn't hear.
Okay,
So,
so the question from Jackie was, do you just kind of auto accept LinkedIn invites? Am I paraphrasing it correctly?
Yeah, unfortunately, a few people raise their hands.
Yeah. So in the room, only a handful of people raise their hands. So for instance, people that want to connect with me, I have to meet them and I have to shake their hand, or I have to be on a call with them. And on rare occasion, it has to be from a vetted source that I validate. So I've put in terms like trust but verify. I've always operated on distrust but verify. That's not personal,
no, it's
right? It's zero trust, it's least privilege. I've been operating that way my entire life. Part of it is probably because I grew up in Oakland, California, but and I love Oakland. Don't get me wrong, I do, but where's the tree slice there?
that's
Gotta watch your back.
fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, that kind of helps. So if we can go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Please. So I think, Jackie, to your point, and to those on the call, on the Zoom, my recommendation to protect yourself on LinkedIn is kind of follow that guide. If you haven't met somebody, you haven't shaken their hand, you haven't been on a call with them, and even then that's becoming risky with AI being on Zoom calls and knowing if that's a real person on the other side. Don't use your work email as your validation email for LinkedIn. Have an alternative. Because I will get invites and people are like, hey, I can't connect with you. Well, that initiates a conversation, a discussion. I can then validate and find out who that individual is before I let anybody into my LinkedIn. That's why my numbers aren't 30, 40, probably they wouldn't be anyway. So, but you know, I try to keep a tight circle. So everybody's on my LinkedIn, I know. There's nobody on there that I don't know. Right?
Yeah.
So leverage it that way, because realize that LinkedIn is great for connecting, but it's also great for not me, but others to do open source intelligence gathering.
The other thing is a validation aspect, which I've had to deal with. Sorry, it's a validation aspect I've had to deal with at multiple jobs where this fake account is already linked with this person, and so you have that association. Oh, well, they're
That's exactly
already
it.
part of my company. They're claiming to be a part of my company, and they're linked with something in my company. It must be okay.
Right.
And we ultimately find out that the company
wasn't.
just allows anybody to associate to them, and then they're off to the races.
Yeah, exactly. So very good point. Always validate, distrust but verify, especially anything online right now. It's unfortunate that we live in that world, but that's what we have to life hack ourselves into and build into muscle memory.
Yeah. And Bill Hicks shared online, he gets weekly LinkedIn requests from attractive 20-something Chinese girls
Bingo.
with no contacts.
Yep. Yep, no, that's exactly it. So yeah, there's a lot of social engineering happening. I was fortunate in my military career. I got to work with the psychological operations side of the house, or the PsyOps piece, which has really helped me professionally to just understand threat assessment, threat awareness, help me as an auditor, help me as an investigator, help me as a CISO in the different roles that I've been. Quick question to the audience and to those online. Can you guess when these bullet points were written? What year? And by the way, don't they kind of look familiar? Have you seen them in presentations just in the past year? I know I have.
Yeah.
Anybody hazard a guess? Anybody online?
We have 20 years
Close.
ago, 2010, 2005, 1998, 15 years.
2004. So 2004, this was a presentation that I did, and it hasn't changed. Why? Right, and I think now we're gonna get into kind of the core of this, and I know already 12:47. So So if you can go to the next slide.
Sure. And real quick, Tim, if you're online, do you want to do one of the survey things? Just pop an answer in the
please do.
chat. And go ahead and keep going
Okay.
until I hear from them.
So,
Please. Oh.
if we look at kind of the world that we're in right now, one of the key challenges is, as leaders, is really identifying what are the threats. Because now, not only do we have real threats, we have augmented, enhanced, so I like what you said, threats leveraging AI, leveraging social engineering techniques. You know, I don't know how many of you have worked with law enforcement, but one of the key things we're starting to see is it's not just nation state actors. We're seeing organized crime now leveraging software development lifecycle, agile QA testing. They have their own VC community. I mean, they've literally productized and then turned this into a commercial process for them. So it is fraud as a service. So as we look at that and we try to adapt to that, you know, we want to kind of look at, do annual audits cut it anymore? Do we really need to be just like, how many of you have children? If you don't, I won't hold it against you. All right, so I have 4. I don't know about any of you, but I don't do a once a year safety briefing with my children. It's pretty much a daily thing, and reminding them, you know, don't touch the iron, don't put your hand in the, you know, boiling water, et cetera, right? So why would that be any different with an organization? Because you get, great, I do my annual security brief and then I kind of just forget about it. So unless you kind of strike that balance of education, awareness, information, again, I'm the leverage report San Diego. One of the best things that we did there is we implemented a program, traffic light protocol, really simple, red, yellow, green. I worked with our marketing department, and what we did is we developed a campaign that is still in use today, I believe. I'll have to ask Billy. But where red means there's an active campaign targeting the port right now, be it email compromise, be it we had a vendor that got compromised, and we're getting a bunch of emails coming from them, but it went out to the entire port. Then we had yellow, which is we got threat intelligence or some type of information or awareness that other ports have been hit by something or are under, you know, a concerted campaign or attack of some sort. And then we had green, and green was probably one of the most effective tiers, and the one that I got the most emails on is the CISO, which was just information. It was periodically we're sending out information. Hey, you know what? We noticed that, you know, back in whenever, there's a Facebook social engineering campaign going on. There's, you know, a particular financial institution seems to be having issues. These are just informational. It's not direct to the port, but what it did is it allowed our employees to not only protect themselves, but now to protect their families. So we
Sure.
made it real, right? It connected. So I can't tell you in 3 years that I was there, the volume of emails I got of just thanking me and the team for giving them information that protected their daughter, their son, their brother, their mother, their grandparents, et cetera. So don't just always think about their people too, right? Don't just think about your employees as just employees. Think about they have families. If their families are safe, what are they focusing on? Work, right? And getting the job done. So take care of them and they will take care of you. So again, threat informed compliance. I think that has been a missing link. We talk about threat intelligence. We talk about information being shared, but we don't necessarily see it affect people, process, and technology in near real time. It's usually after the fact. It's usually in the rear. Something's already happened. We get the information. One of the things that we implemented at the port of San Diego was when we got awareness, we then go and do a historical scrub to see if that IP had ever shown up at any time in the past. right? We didn't just say, oh, great, we got threat intelligence, it's old, we're not gonna deal with it. We'd actually proactively do a hunt internally to make sure, and then we eventually got to where we scripted it. So we got a list in, popped in the list, and then it run on a schedule and automate it. Now that we have AI, now that we can use, and again, I'm not a big Microsoft fan, so hopefully nobody works for Microsoft on the list, but Power Automate, Power BI, you know, leveraging those automation tools, those store components, to not just look at proactive, but also from audits, from findings, from threat intelligence, integrating that into just part of your daily practice, right? Make it muscle memory. As we all know, and we're kind of feeling, especially this year and over the past few years, cross-border challenges. Now that we're in this age, for me, a bit equals an atom, so physical and digital has been a part of my makeup since I joined the military. Because electronic warfare, intelligence, signal intelligence, communications, I realized very quickly that all of that impacted real life and death, actions, decisions that our politicians made, that our leadership made, that, you know, had considerable effect in the kinetic world was due to digital information. So the cross-border challenges, keeping up with, you know, global regulations. Again, you just mentioned you passed, you know, the ISO 27001, took a year to get it done. That's an achievement, right? But that's just one step of it. But it gives you some visibility, because I can't tell you how many times I go into clients and they're like, well, does GDPR affect me? How many of you know about CMMC? Great. So I don't know if we can poll on that online, but
Not in real time
Okay,
here, but
yeah.
go ahead, because there's
Yeah,
something I want to add to that.
so the cybersecurity maturity model was originally kind of developed with Department of Defense. And you know, I was fortunate I got to contribute to some of the original draft of that when it was still 5 tiers instead of 3, and glad they went to 3. But that's almost a practical approach to how to secure data, right? Everybody in the room, our personal data, our corporate data, our clients' data, that's the real goal, right? That's what everybody wants to get a hold of. Talk to any of the major social media companies, right? That's what they want is data. Well, so does our adversaries. So we have to be aware of, did you have a?
I just want to add on, the difference between CMMC versus. The difference between CMMC and other things that we've seen where you're getting audited or whatever, is that you have to do the validation, right?
Correct.
And they're demanding that they see what you're using for that particular line item, right? And then that's just in a lot of other frameworks that are out there. So CMMC is very strict, and a lot of people are thinking out about it because they're not ready for it.
No, they aren't, and they, you know, again, we try to put it out there, and that's the challenge too. What's real and what's not, right? What compliance? Sure.
I was just gonna say, I was reading an article yesterday where Canada has come out with their version of CMMC.
Mhm.
So to kind of show what a cluster this potentially can be, Canada's is based on CMMC revision 3. Or the US CMMC is based on revision 2.
Doesn't align.
So if you
Right.
take a company that serves both nations, that's the path that company has to go through to be compliant.
Yeah,
So,
and if you look at NIST, a great point, because as auditors, any of you who have worked in GRC, that has been a massive challenge. Which version of NIST, which revision am I gonna be using? Is
right,
it 853? Is it 171? Is it 172? Right? So which ones do you apply? If you look at ISO 27001, well, there's ISO 27002, ISO 27003, 2010, 2012, 20, right? So there's all these iterations. You look at COVID, you look at NIST, you look at you know, home built hybrid, right? Where you got a mixture of I like to keep things simple. I'm a big fan of serious play, which was a concept that was developed by Legos. Way back when in the early 2000s. They basically said that it was a way of communicating, how do you build basic building blocks? Right, when you structure anything, architect an environment, build a new data center, facilitate a new product, hardware, what have you. You want those foundational blocks. Complexity is going to happen, be it you design it or be your clients take you in that direction. So with all of these compliancy standards, I reverse engineered those down to really simple structured blocks that you need to defend that will allow you to matrix out. Doesn't
Right.
matter what compliance you're following, right? The key thing is, are you practicing it? Not is it a checkbox exercise? It's a big coffee table book that just sits there, right? And that's usually what happens to vulnerability scans, and that's what usually happens to audits, right? It becomes a really nice coffee table. There's a nice coupe that's developed and everything else, but then they don't really put it into practice, right? So I'm a firm believer of what are the common denominators. So again, building a security aware culture, reemphasize Port of San Diego. What we did is we cyber deputized everybody. Not one person was afraid to say, I clicked on a link. More often than not, we got to the point where I literally had people show up at my office to apologize that they clicked on a link. And they had already changed their password before we even got to it. So I mean, like within 3 minutes, they were like, boom, I made a mistake. I knew I made a mistake. And they were already remediating it without my team having to chase it down and scold people and, you know, all of that. We just made it a positive environment. Now, you know, those that were perpetual, they went through remedial training, but, right? So you do have those, it's like on everything. AI and compliance. That's a deep dive, but it's something that we all need to think about. We have had organizations that have kind of leaned over their skis a little bit and announced, hey, we do AI, and then realized that AI just isn't one thing, right? We all know 1,000 things potentially. So I'm going to give you guys some food for thought. I've been trying to share a concept of active AI versus passive AI versus productive AI. And the reason why is active AI could be a wide range of things. ChatGPT, it's, you know, decisioning very large amounts of data, but active AI is something that you're choosing to use. Your company, your employees, your staff, they're actively using AI in what they do. Passive AI, it's kind of dangerous. And passive AI is when you find out after the fact, I'm gonna pick on LinkedIn again, after the fact, they applied AI to their environment, but they didn't really tell anybody until after the fact. That's passive AI, right? I mean, Microsoft went through it with Copilot, Recall. We, as auditors, have to kind of factor that in and start asking those questions. Do you know if your vendors or if your applications that you're using are actively using AI as part of their solution? And that gets into right to audit, that gets into really asking those hard questions of your vendors. Are they leveraging AI in some way and how? So that's critical path. And then the, so is active, passive.
Productive.
Huh?
You said productive.
Productive. So productive AI is where AI is applied to something like manufacturing, where it's helping to facilitate weaknesses in manufacturing techniques, or right, it's not creating anything, it's not culminating, it's not solutioning anything, it's not using kind of what we call the hallucinatory aspects of AI, or it's almost like a 12-year-old. I know enough, but where I don't know enough, I just fill in the gaps. Productive AI is something that I'm seeing more and more of. And this gets back to your earlier question, sorry, don't know your name, but the attestation. So this is where AI is saying, I have the information or I don't have the information. And if I have it, I now have the artifact, so I can provide you the raw source of where I got that information. So it provides that level of accuracy. So I've always approached AI from an adversarial standpoint. How can it be used against? About a year and a half ago, I realized I was kind of a blind point of view that I really needed to take a look at it from a productivity standpoint. And it's really opened up my eyes to how to better defend my clients from AI as they apply it in their environment, rightfully so. I mean, it really does help quite a bit. Next slide, please. By the way, I know I'm jumping through this, but any questions on this? Yes.
I actually have some, not issues, but like to have a discussion about your AI philosophy.
Sure.
I like the active passive concepts for productive. I think the NIST community describes AI as like either predictive or generative.
Yep.
So I think productive is, there's a lot of overlap with predictive there. And I think you could have.
I agree.
Generative, both active and passive. Passive is probably more like supply chain, is what the industry's calling it right now.
So yeah, definitely don't disagree with you. I agree with you. The reason why I kind of created the productive, just to let you know, I'm old. I've been around for a while, so I've been involved in kind of the deep grandfather of AI back in the days of Falcon, back in '93, and Landcope Stealth Watch and heuristics and neural networks and things along those lines. And I still don't consider myself an expert. So I think what you're saying is a big part of the challenge is how do we create the appropriate context, right, for how AI is being applied, how it's being used, because that then ties back to, I think, the gap in the AI compliance, right, and the policies. And I've worked with NIST and developed some modules on the CSET tool, both contributed to CIE, which is Cyber Informed Engineering. We just put a module in there that we tested out last year for microgrids. Right, so here we are talking about utilities and energy and, well, how is it controlled? How is it monitored? How is it supported? Well, through the digital interface. Well, then you got AI trying to maximize how well is that running. Now, what are you exposing, right? So it's is that productivity AI? Is it not? Is it, how is it being applied? So yeah, I agree with you. I think how do we?
It's kind of like one pager or a paper.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, half my time I spend really trying to give back to the community. The one nice thing about being a hacker originally was we started off with there are no boundaries. There is no box. There is nothing stopping us from going anywhere in the world digitally or telephonically or what happened back in the blue box, pro box, pink box days. So I've always approached when I go into my clients to really kind of take a look at that and do they know what's coming in? Do they know what's going out? And that gets into data governance, that gets the data classification, that gets into data stewardship. How do we monitor and protect? Well, all of that ties back to audit, investigation, cyber protection. How do you secure and protect that information?
I can sure. You could say the NIST 400, the security framework around AI for NIST and ISO, almost in a weird way, it's completely focused on data governance, data integrity, on supply chain, whether or not the raw data set that you're using,
Right.
Has integrity. Strangely enough, it's not very focused on the fundamentals of
Exactly.
security, and
Yep.
it's kind of odd, but fair enough.
Yeah, we need to hear your voice. I mean, really, it's the key thing is I think all of us in this room see different aspects, different views. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. We tend to get myopic about certain things because it's something that they can put into a box, right, and control. I'm not saying boil the ocean, right? I'm definitely not condoning that. But I think how do you get to that piece, right? What's the process? What's the procedure? How does that align? right? Because every time I hear CMMC, I also hear about CUI. Right, control of unclassified information. It used to be FOIU, right? So for official use only. So that's all kind of shifted. So there's a lot of that kind of interconnected components to it. Was this the next slide or?
I thought it was.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
So here we're talking about kind of AI driven tools. We've really kind of talked about that throughout the process here, because it's integrated into our lives. This is what we do. Can't hide from it. It's part of life hacking skills. We need our the next generation, they know it, but they don't know. Right. So again, being from my age, I've seen where I was the remote for my TV because I had to get up and click. Right, to now I can talk into my phone and have it change the channel, start up my stereo, turn on the lights, do everything. But because I lived in that generation, I knew how a calculator worked because I could build it. I know how my phone works because I've actually worked and gone down to component level. I know what side channeling is. I know, right? So part of that I think is missing, and this generation has absorbed this so fast, and it's not a bad thing, but I think we as practitioners need to help them better understand, right, that next layer, and again, that Sherlock Holmes, right, those layers deeper, to really figure out, okay, if this stops working, this isn't just a simple troubleshooting, your entire life could be at risk, right? People can know where you're at that maybe you don't want to. Again, don't want to be a downer on this, but I've dealt with some pretty nasty cases of human trafficking, of trying to track down somebody real time. And their social media is being used to impersonate that they're okay. Right. So, and the parents had no idea how to approach any of those social platforms to say, could you please put a legal hold on that data? Because it's going to be used if, we both save the individual and build a court case against the human traffickers. That's not something you think about in the moment in time, right? So it's those types of awareness things. I know I've probably, so to kind of go down through the list, and to your point, AI can help us in a lot of different ways, can augment and enhance. So some of the positive things, and I'm not trying to be negative about AI, is that it helps us move faster. Because when I used to do open source intelligence, right, and there's probably someone the line that would say, oh, I could do it faster than that, but it used to take me probably about 2 to 3 days to put an actual package together on a particular target. Right, so that means I had to go to multiple sources and dig up open source intelligence, go to LexisNexis, go to a wide variety of sources that are pretty easy to get a hold of now. AI now has turned that into, I can do 20 separate individuals in about 3 hours and do complete dossiers on all of them. So, go ahead.
Does that include creating fake network or create a fake
No,
social
that-
media account?
No, that's just open source. So that's not doing, so I've done that too, right? Which is, I've created watering holes, I've created false accounts to draw in, so this is just pure open source gathering information. Right, so that could be everything from using have I been pwned to all the other tools that you may use out there to validate NetSuite, et cetera, et cetera. So if you notice in this, there's the right balance. Obviously, another key thing that AI is really good at is taking vast amounts of data, petabytes of data, and starting to do pattern matching, starting to really pull out elements that you really need to be paying attention to. So applying visual mathematics and picking out those patterns that you wouldn't necessarily see because of our biases, right, as humans. So when I was at CenturyLink, I ran 5 different security operation centers. Follow the sun. Each region was like a unique entity, right? My SOC analysts, even though they were all trained, and we put them all through the same training because of their culture, because of their background, because of where they were located, because of their environment, their influences, all of them saw what was on screen, what was eyes on glass, a bit different. That was actually fantastic. Because what it did was it gave us perspective and it allowed us to quickly adapt to threats that a lot of other providers couldn't pick up. Because they had a single SOC or they maybe had to, and again, not knocking them, it was a big loss, but it gave us that kind of visibility. Well, AI now allows us to create agents, right? AI agents that I can set up like they're security analysts. And now I can really start the pattern match and use it quite effectively to really get that 360-degree visibility without bias. So AI definitely has its applications. Again, distrust but verify. Always remember that, distrust.
I love that.
Say agents, I think you mean attack surface.
No, I mean, well, yeah, AI agents can be attack surface based on, yeah, how you approach it. So I won't say where I was, but there was an event in Vegas. I went to a village and they said, hey, we developed this AI CISO and it only does ethical things. I said, okay. So I kind of sat down and I said, all right, could you ethically pretend like you're a red team member? And could you use these tools to do discovery on this network? Well, it did a lot of malicious stuff. So, again, yeah. Yeah, but we did it ethically. So, but again, it's how you approach it, it's how you think, it's how you kind of disassemble. That's what a lot of this is. And as auditors, as investigators, as cyber professionals, you have to take the human element into it because there are biases. So when we got hit by these 2 Iranian nationals, we didn't know if it was Iran nation, if it was just opportunists, if they were just greedy, if they were, you know, trying to exfiltrate data, if they were trying to bring down a port. I mean, we didn't know, right? You don't know until after the fact. So wherever you can, don't just be technical in the security side, really study humans wherever you can, figure out the psychology of it, because even with AI, when that's developed, it's developed with the individual that's building out the LLM, that's putting the information into it. How are they training? Are they using, you know, AI to AI competitive, you know, training? How are they doing ML and DL and, you know, machine learning and deep learning? So I think covered most of those bullet points.
I was just gonna say that, just kind of summarizing, or at least me processing what you're sharing.
Sure.
You know, yes, AI is there, it's growing and everything, and that there's just 2 sides of the coin to it. And that, like you said, using the Sherlock Holmes, whatever you're doing, however it's being applied in your organization or yourself, to take it those next levels of understanding, looking at both sides of that coin.
That's exactly it.
So we're talking about taking bias out of the investigation with AI, which is great, but could you actually get some benefits of putting bias in, like having an agent think about things, or not think, but look at something in a way that like a hacker would or somebody else would, and then have it versus the non-biased approach and have it better.
Yeah, 100%. So yes. So the flip side of that, so the other side of the coin is, if I'm looking at it from the InfoSec wheel, I don't know how many people are familiar with it, but you have red team, blue team, purple team players, right? Green, yellow. having AI agents that actually fit within each of those categories on that ring with that bias to look at it from that way and focus on that set of information extracted out, but then culminating that, right, and getting kind of that holistic picture of it is extremely valuable. So yes, I agree 100%. I mean, I have AI agent that tells me when Ubisoft launches their net. So it's just looking for game launches. Next screen. All right, so really this is the last slide. And this goes back to what I kind of opened up the conversation with is keep it simple. So how many of you are familiar with business impact analysis? How many of you think it's effective? Got one-
Two sides
one
of that.
partial, two.
Two sides of
Yeah,
that
two
coin
sides of that
too.
coin, right? But here's the thing, I'm not talking about performing the business impact analysis, I'm talking about the usage of business impact analysis later. Right, so do you see percentage wise, do you see the companies or your own company or your own clients actually leveraging business impact analysis for making security decisions?
That would be a yes.
I wrote literally an article about that yesterday.
Oh,
in-
fantastic.
In the context of, so background, healthcare,
Mhm.
number one hit, industry last year,
Yep.
right? And background CIO, CISO of healthcare organizations, right?
So-
Being in these conversations with the financial decision maker, right? And
Exactly.
what I did is I kind of drew from another healthcare thing, right? Which is looking at, as a patient, your doctor is supposed to lay out everything that you need to know in
To make an
a,
informed decision.
it's informed consent is what it's
Right,
called,
right,
right? But the biggest problem with informed consent is optimism bias, right? So what happens when you do that, right?
Mhm.
And if you don't explicitly call out those biases, what you're looking at is them saying, not gonna happen to me, right?
Yes,
The worst case scenarios in there, not gonna happen to us, right? And as a result, what you have is 94% of organizations are not HIPAA compliant. 94% of organizations, and a larger number most likely, are not funding this stuff regardless of what the BIA says.
thank you, you just validated exactly why I was bringing this up. No, seriously, it's. I've been doing this again for a while, I know some of you have as well, and I would think, like me, I am frustrated. I am very frustrated being a practitioner, being an operator, being a former MSSP, really trying to help organizations better strengthen their environments. Cyber and, people whine, right? Oh, well, security is always bolt on, it's always the last thing. Well, it's because a lot of the time, and this is why I think CISOs are shifting into almost the CSO role, right? Chief Security Officer, so much broader. You see, and not that I have anything against CIOs, because I think there's one on the Zoom. CIOs think that they understand security, and I'm not saying that they don't, but we need to combine so that they understand if I can't do payroll, if I can't receive transactions, if I can't deliver, report findings to the field, because we have a pipeline that just burst and I need to get the appropriate, not only first responders, but they also have to have the right protective gear based on what kind of breach it is, what the damage is it on fire, is it not on fire, is it just leaking, is it, right? So all of those aspects, all of those elements, each organization, be it government, private sector, what have you, needs to take a look at cybersecurity because it is so integrated in everything that we do. I almost want to try and get rid of the word cyber because it's just security. It's digital security, it's physical security.
Right.
How do we tie that into what impacts the business and prevents it from operating? So, next slide. Closing thoughts are, again, you guys can read, so I'm not gonna read it to you, but, you know, it's like one of those things, okay, I had a thought and it kind of gets stuck with it, all right. We have a lot to work to do. I don't think it's insurmountable. I think if you start to really break down into those basic components, you can be successful. And I think having a broad point of view and having both control biases and having, you know, understanding when there's biases that are kind of like what I ran into. I only looked at AI adversarially, meaning how could I manipulate it? How can I break it? How can I, you know, get in there and steal intellectual property and all that? Not that I did, didn't say I did. But how could I do that? Versus, okay, how do I actually use it? And man, it has just opened up my eyes. So it's really allowed me to kind of see both sides of it, and that's key to anything. You got to see both sides of that coin. So thank you very much, Dave, for bringing that up. Because again, as a gray hat, I've been on the side of not getting caught, right? And doing things and going into places that I shouldn't be. But then learning the other side of it of how do I prevent people like what I used to be from getting in there and doing harm? I wasn't doing harm, I just wanted to know stuff. But you know, that's gonna be critical in what we do. And at the Port of San Diego, by the way, the audit was an independent agency, reported only to the commissioners, along with general counsel. What was interesting about that is traditionally audit was kind of treated as a stepchild.
Sure.
And when I got there, I embraced audit and I brought them in. And the amazing thing about it is it allowed us to then justify why we need to spend money.
Right.
Right, to make things happen and protect things. And it wasn't because Robert said. It was the audit department came in and really took a look and said, hey, here's some real weaknesses that we have within this ecosystem. So next slide, I think, is just. Thank you.
It's you again.
Yeah, I appreciate
No,
your
great
time.
job. Thank
Thank
you. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions or? Nope. Okay,
Great presentation.
cool.
All right, I appreciate it.
Dude, you're
Thank you very
awesome.
much.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you for everybody online. I appreciate it. Hopefully none of you fell asleep on your keyboard.
Yeah.
See any like tildes, like a bunch of them.
Right. No, just a lot of thank yous, good presentation.
Oh, thanks.